and it is hard to fully process a concern for the rights of victims when one is in fact killing them. Jeremy is taking note of this, but still tires of such behavior in others. Sometimes, Jeremy, you're just too nice. It's a mean world. She kisses him once, and is less so. He grumbles angrily in his mind at how they could possibly devote a whole news report to sheer trash like Pratt. No real reputation, no ideas that could benefit community, no real redeeming social graces, and even as a source of entertainment, he could often be pretty mediocre. TV is really puzzling to Jeremy sometimes. As Jeremy often does, he wonders exactly what it is that makes him not a monster. This is more of a logical exercise than a line of deep moral questioning. In fact, he very quickly comes up with a variety of highly satisfying replies to the question. He remembers first of all that he is above guilt. It is something to be banished from his mind. He is above guilt and beyond evil actions. Jeremy Jenkins, in turn, it turns out, is far too relevant to deal in murky moral absolutes. Jeremy does the right thing. He stops and savors the quiet produced by all the squealing, mewling, nasty little dark ones that he has kept from emerging, and kept from spraying the seeds of ignorance and wrath. Only this and cats bring him the requisite peace and time to clear his head that allow him to enjoy the knowledge that thanks to Jeremy Jenkins, paladin and patriot, the world is safe. He smiles down on Cass and means it. So seldom does he mean it. So often is the smile a tool and a sidearm. Cass has fallen asleep, which is a shame, because he considers letting her know that were he to divulge his actions, he would be a media sensation, and that whether he does or not, he is a rebel genius, and the greatest killer since the Black Death. He is not often proud of it, but she might very well be. He thinks about just how adoring and fawning she would be if she knew about his work, but realizes that he needs to remain anonymous. That TV and such things don't really become him much. He considers slicing her open and checking for wires, but instead he delicately and subtly lets his fingers slip into her, feels the chill and excitement of her not seeing or knowing about all kinds of manipulations and maneuvers. No TV for him. I'm not a superstar, he tells himself. I'm a Superman.
All right, our next author will be an easier introduction for me because I've known him my whole life. Because it's me. I'm David Agranoff. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and this is my second time reading at Quimby's, and thank you, Quimby's, for having us. I really appreciate this really awesome bookstore, and but I want to put another plug in for all the books. The book I'm hawking personally today is The Vault of Punk Horror, and it's an anthology, 15 different stories, 15 authors, from like big professionals like John Shirley, who wrote the screenplay for The Crow and wrote like some of the earliest cyberpunk novels. Actually, he wrote the first cyberpunk novel long before William Gibson, but whatever. John Shirley, Lisa Morton, Cody Goodfellow. We have 3 Bizarro authors in here: Carrie Beltane, Gina Rinaldi, who we have several books of, and Jeremy Robert Johnson, who wrote the cockroach suit surviving the apocalypse story. And my story in here is called The Call, and it has the distinction of being the only story in the collection that was written in solitary confinement with a golf pencil. And that's totally true. I was involved in a First Amendment fight, and I wrote that one there. But I'm not going to read from that story, so you're going to have to buy the book if you want to read that one. And that has an introduction by Dee Snider. Yes, the real Dee Snider. So that's pretty cool. I was going to read, because it's Bizarro night, I was going to read a story called The Fifth Noble Truth, which is probably my weirdest story. But it's kind of long, so I decided to read something else. But Fifth Noble Truth is available online if you search for it. And it was in Flurb, which is a science fiction online magazine edited by Rudy Rudker, who is another cyberpunk author, very world-famous mathematician. And I was just tickled pink that he accepted that story. And but what I'm going to read tonight is from a novella called The Network. And The Network is in my short story collection, Screams from a Dying World, the second edition. It was not in the first edition, but it's in the second edition. That's coming out from Afterbirth Books. It's a trade paperback by the end of the year. In The Network, I'm just reading, there's 3 kind of threads going on in the novella, and I'm just reading from one of the 3 threads, and it follows 2 characters, Randy and Diana, and what it's about is it takes place at a tree sit protest in Western Washington, and basically what you need to know ahead of this is that the people protesting have just found out that the sheriff's department is coming to use cherry pickers to evacuate them from the tree sit. And secretly, Diana and Randy and a friend who's no longer with them at the tree sit have built a network of cables and wires that connect to a suicide platform in the middle of the forest. And they built this secretly. This is based on a real tree sit that I was sort of involved with in Indiana, and the architect of the attempted suicide platform may or may be not here tonight. But anyways, basically the idea is that if any one of the wires or the cables gets cut, the whole thing comes down and it snaps the neck of the person you locked into the suicide platform. And so this opens with the section right before I'm going to start reading. Diana, who's in the suicide platform, has just told Randy she does not want a copy of the key on her. So if the sheriffs try to get her out, they can't search her to look for a key. She leaned back against the lock, and it twisted back enough not to feel comfortable. It had only been a minute, and already she knew sitting up comfortably was impossible. But leaning back was much worse. That thin bar of metal covered in rubber was all that kept her from falling more than 200 feet. Randy had switched out the batteries in the flashlight, which was still hooked to her belt. He was going to give her a walkie-talkie as soon as she was ready. They would radio camp and let them know. Ian would then contact the media, and hopefully the news crews would rush over from Seattle with satellite feeds that would play in Olympia. It wouldn't be long before the senators that had been on the fence would see that it's not worth the battle and vote to include this valley in the national park. Randy had pushed off and was crawling back against the rope. "You have everything?" Diana felt around for her flashlight. A full water bottle was in her jacket pocket, and of course the radio. She patted on the pocket of her jacket. Nothing. She could barely make out Randy's face. His headlamp, he had on his headlamp, and she almost went blind looking at him. No, wait, I don't have a radio. Ah, shit. Randy felt the weight of the Motorola in his pocket and swung around in his harness. He had already slid halfway back to their main tree, but he wasn't close enough to hand off the radio. He held it out by the stiff plastic antenna. Diana stretched sideways, her neck chafing the side of the lock. Her fingertips grazed the bottom of the radio, but not enough to grab it. "Randy, is it too much to ask for you to come back?" "You're right, I've got to." With the radio still in his left hand, he held it against the rope, while his right loosened the harness just enough to move. Diana watched this in the glow of his headlamp, and her jaw dropped. She didn't have time to form the words. Randy knew better. He didn't have a hold of the rope, and the radio slipped right out of his hands. It sailed quickly into the darkness, falling far enough that neither of them heard a sound when it landed. Randy flailed, trying to catch it before it was gone. Another terrible realization hit him. Randy had loosened the wrong hook. When he reached for the radio, the carabiner must have spun open. The harness slipped along Randy's body, and he screamed as it slid past his legs. He reached up and tightened a stretch cord as he fell. It was a miracle he was able to do so in the darkness past the glow of the headlamp, but the harness tightened around his ankle, almost snapping his foot off completely. The sudden jolt of his weight pulling on the rope snapped the red line. Randy swung like Tarzan while Diana screamed, expecting